Can you hear me? Okay, great. I promise I will not yell into the headphones. Great, great. So first of all, very glad to be here. You know, this is my first time in Bsides Philly, and amazing, audience, amazing speakers. My name is Madhav Gopal. I'm the CISO of a fintech plus a music company called Jukebox, right? It is spelled JKBX, but it's pronounced Jukebox, right? I've been in the Philly area for about 18 years now, right? Really love the Philly area. As I said, so glad to be here with you all today. Lots of familiar faces in the crowd, so thank you for coming, everybody. So the way I look at things is, I look at everything as a series of journeys, right? And that's really important because a lot of times people think, hey, we are getting to a destination. The destination is important. But to me, the journey is as important and probably more important than the destination, right? So I'm going to be talking about 3 journeys today, right? And kind of share through what I went through, what my perspectives were, right? So the first journey is going to be about my career, right? How I got into cybersecurity. And I was not in cybersecurity all throughout. I did so many other things. And then also how I landed from a Fortune 30 company to a 40-person startup, right? So that's journey number 1. Journey number 2 is going to be about music copyrights, right? And my company and the model that we have, the business that we are in, right? So kind of walking through the history and the kind of the forward-looking aspect there. And then the last piece that I will talk about is probably one of the most interesting things here for you guys is how do you build security in, right? You're talking about a music company, you're talking about a company where people are working constantly with artists, with composers, right? How do you make sure that security is part of everybody's culture, everybody's ethos? So that's kind of the nutshell. This is not a very technical topic. I'm likely not going to do a full hour. So if you have questions, please raise your hand. I will pause for questions at the end as well. Great, great. So let me jump in. So about me, right? And I kind of put these 2 graphics, right? So the first graphic is obviously a map of our country, right? But the reason I put it in there is because my career started first as a software developer, but very quickly after that as a consultant, right? And I was in 25 different states before I knew it. I was working on different technology projects, mainly in the telecom industry. And what really kind of shaped my career was, at some point I was like, okay, this traveling is great, but I really want to kind of do something at one place, kind of build my experiences, right? And that brought me to Comcast about 18 years ago, right? And at Comcast I had 6 or 7 different roles. I did all the way from technology audit to engineering operations to business operations to syndication. And my last role there was as VP of cybersecurity operations, right? And that becomes really interesting because when you think of Comcast, it's a Fortune 30 company, obviously, but you have this gigantic network, the largest network in the world that you're trying to protect. You have data for 30 million customers, right? So it's a really, eye-opening concept to, hey, how can you, use the right processes, the right people, the right technology to protect this network, but at the same time move your team forward, right? So that was kind of, for the most of my career. And then in the last year, I kind of pivoted a little bit. And I said, look, I've been working at large companies for a while. I've been doing this Fortune 30 thing, right? It is time for me to do something different, right? And, this was just completely coincidental, but I came across this company, which is basically, as you can see, right? It's trying to build this, platform for music royalties, right? And, if I can get a show of hands, how many people here listen to music on a daily, if not hourly basis? Most of you, right? So every time you listen to music, whether it's on Spotify, whether it's on the radio station, whether it's a music that's getting played there is a royalty that kind of comes back, right? And it typically goes to what are people who are known as the rights holders, right? People who own the copyright to the music, right? So from that perspective, it's a very interesting company, and I'll get into a little bit more details. But for me, the whole concept was, hey, I'm someone who is working, in an ISP, and now I'm shifting and working with people who know Adele by first name basis, people who know Beyonce, go to Beyonce's parties, right? So it's a completely paradigm shift for me, but a very interesting opportunity to build my skills, right? So, kind of, it's important for folks to understand what really defines me, right? When I took this role, for me, one of the main reasons was, hey, look, I have the opportunity to build something from the scratch, right? And this is my son, my 11-year-old son, planting a tree, right? So I think this is a great example of saying that it is such an important aspect to be at the beginning, to be able to build something out, and to make that investment, right? And to look at security as an investment, as something that can really take things to the next level, right? And really, not just look at it from, hey, look, I'm building something that is, and in the infancy, but also I'm building it for the long term. It's an investment that I'm making in my time and effort so that it really grows, right? And one of the values that really defines me is servant leadership, right? How can I not just build my function, but also empower my team to constantly, do the next thing and build some of those experiences that will take them forward. So that was my first journey, right? My journey to Comcast, and from Comcast to a much smaller company, but really kind of building those skills as I move forward, right? The second journey kind of goes back all the way to 1847. And this is a cafe in Paris, right? So there were, I think, 3 or 4 musicians who were having a drink, enjoying some, really amazing French food, cheese, wine, all of those things, right? And suddenly they realized that the music that was playing was their music, right? The band was playing a beautiful song, but it was music that they had composed, right? And they decided not to pay the bill. And that became a whole legal dispute because the whole thing was, look, I'm sitting in this cafe, my music is being played, but I'm not getting any, income from that, right? And they got into this legal dispute with the owner of the cafe, and that was kind of the genesis of the modern music copyright industry, right? To really say, hey, how do we make sure that composers, musicians, songwriters get paid fairly for the creative work that they do, right? And if you kind of take it to the future, right? If you look at what music copyrights are today, it's very simply, these are the 2 things that are primarily there, right? First is you have the concept of what is known as a composition copyright, right? So anytime the music is created, whether it's a lyrics, whether it's actual composition, right? It can be the songwriter, it can be the studio where the music is created, right? So that is a composition copyright, and then that copyright, that piece of music, when it gets played by an actual artist, right? Let's say Taylor Swift writes a song, but then Taylor Swift doesn't record it, but somebody else records it, right? Then you have the concept of the recording copyright. So those 2 copyrights are really what kind of define modern day music, right? And anytime you hear a song, right, both of these copyrights have a royalty that is associated with it, right? So someone is getting paid. And it does not have to be on the TV, it does not have to be on the radio, it can be in a hospital, it can be in a public venue such as this, right, where those music copyrights go in. And from industry standpoint, royalties play a crucial role, right? Because they're supporting, artists, songwriters, publishers, right? They're supporting the record labels, right? But you're also looking at this as $40 billion in annual revenue, right? So it's a pretty big deal, right? And just if you kind of look at how fast it is growing, between 2017 to 2022, the size or the number of streams of music that were played went up by more than 2.5%, right? So it's a pretty large increase as it kind of goes through. It's also fairly lucrative. If you look at music that's been around for 10 years or more, it's constantly getting played. There's steady royalty stream associated with it. So one of the things that is important here is my company kind of comes into play here. What we are trying to do is we are trying to take this part of the industry, part of the music industry, and say that a lot of these music royalties are only going to record labels, to private equity. How can we open it up to ordinary investors, to music fans, to people who care about the music? The easiest example that I like to use is, hey, you have an Apple iPhone, right? But you can actually buy Apple stock, and anytime anybody buys an Apple iPhone, you benefit from it. So that's what we are trying to do. We are trying to build this regulated platform that will really help. And if you look at how a business is set up, right? There are basically three components. The first component is the actual music. So, what Jukebox, my company, has done is that we have worked with the record labels, we have worked with the rights holders to say, hey, you have this music, let us put it on the platform. You will get the equity back, right? You'll be able to unlock that equity, right? And then at the same time, ordinary investors, music fans can benefit from the royalty stream that is associated with that. That's number one. Number two is saying, okay, we got to build a marketplace, right? Obviously it won't look like that, right? But it'll be a digital marketplace, just like your Fidelity or Robinhood, where you can buy and trade music. And that's important, right? So it's not just the buying of assets or buying of music royalty shares, but also being able to trade it, being able to exchange it for something else. Let's say you bought Adele, right? One of her songs, and then you want to swap it for Hello by Beyonce, right? You could do that, right? So that's the approach that we're taking. But for all of that to work, what is missing here, right? And this is something that the crypto industry never really caught up to, right? They were like, okay, we're going to build this, but they didn't really care about the regulation. They didn't care about the framework that you need, right? You don't, the laws that we need to follow, right? From a cybersecurity standpoint, making sure that we are building a platform that, secures customer data, both PI and financial information, right? But also at the same time, getting the right qualifications from the Securities and Exchange Commission, because we are going to be a regulated entity, right? And from FINRA, which is a broker-dealer license, to make sure that, hey, we can trade some of these assets, right? So that's how kind of Jukebox is set up. The easiest way to think of us is if Spotify and Robinhood had a baby, we would be it, right? So you take a exchange, and then you couple it with music, and you really take that approach. So that's, from a business perspective, that's my second journey, right? And then the third journey is security, right? Okay, as part of the founding team last year, I had to convince the team, hey, why is security important? Why should we really look at security in the context of Jukebox? And there were three things that I put out there. First is this concept of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that was the best graphic I could find. So if you guys have anything better, please feel free to share, right? But there's so much panic around security. Everybody's like, oh, you're going to get popped. You're going to get hacked. Any email that comes, my CEO, like literally every day, he's like, is this a phishing email? I'm like, no, it's not a phishing email. The domain looks authentic, right? So first is, hey, really saying that we got to move beyond the FUD and talk about what's the actual risk. Is it even a risk? Is it something that we need to care about today, or is it something that we need to address down the road, right? Number one. Number two, look, our ecosystem is constantly changing, right? Even within the music space, there's a lot of innovation going on, right? Spotify is going through, all kinds of things, changes. But from a technology standpoint, with generative AI over the last, year or so, right? It's so much easier for people to use that to attack us, to do so many different things, right? So really, looking at security as a dynamic concept and saying, okay, what can we do to protect the company as we pivot and we try out different things, right? And then the last piece, which no surprises here, from a regulatory and, whether it's cybersecurity regulation, right? Whether it's privacy regulation. Obviously, we are a startup, so we don't need to worry about the SEC, the recent announcement that came out, hey, we are looking at potentially having companies report breaches in, within 48 hours, right? But at some point, we have to kind of include those things and say, as we build this company that's going to stand for, long, long time, how can we make sure that we are in compliant with privacy and cybersecurity regulation? But most importantly, my story was, hey, security really moves the business forward, right? If you want to grow, security is a strategic imperative, right? Especially, the industry that we are in, we are a fintech, right? Would you go into Fidelity or, Charles Schwab and log in with a 8-digit password? Yes, you might, but you will still need to do MFA, right? Your session will time out in, like 15 minutes, right? So, consumers like you, like anybody out there, view security as a given. They want their fintechs, their trusted providers to provide that high bar of service from a security perspective. So it's not an option, it is something that you have to do to move the business forward. And then the question would then be, how do we do this, right? What are some of the things that we can do here? So I think the North Star that we chose, and Chris, who is on our team as well as a contractor, knows this very well, is to say, hey, we have to build security in, right? We have to build security in how employees do their day-to-day work, right? How, developers do their work, right? So adopting secure development lifecycle, right? And last but not the least, how customers interact with us, right? And that is probably one of the most important things, because once you lose that trust, you are not able to get it back. So really kind of focusing on that. And with that in mind, basically we had three things. First is to take a proactive approach, to work with developers, make sure that, if we find a security defect, my team is doing the pull requests, kind of giving them the information that's needed to fix it, right? To really meet them, from where they are at, right? Not wait for people to come to the security team and say, hey, what do you need, right? That's number one. Number two, going back to what I said earlier, right? Really looking at security as an investment and saying, okay, how can we build security in everything that we do? Our team interacts with artists. We have information about artists, across the board. How do we secure that information, right? We are obviously 100% on cloud. We are serverless. What are some of the things that we can do to make sure that we have the right visibility going forward? And then last but not the least is, we can't take a one-size-fits-all approach. We have to take a risk-based approach, right? Some things might work for certain things, others may not. We don't need MFA and very aggressive timeouts in staging. We just need it in production, right? So really taking that risk-based approach and saying, okay, where's the most risk? What can we do to address that? And then, from a challenges perspective, we really had three big things that we are looking at, right? So the first is visibility, right? Whether it's from a performance standpoint, whether it's from a security perspective, right? Even though we are small, we are already collecting a lot of data. We got to make sense of the data. We got to figure out, okay, is this an actual attack, right? Our CEO is based out of UK. Is he, why is he suddenly showing up in Italy, right? Whether it's impossible travel, right? So those are the kind of things, really taking a look and saying, okay, how do we make sense of the data? How do we build that foundation to give us the insights that we need from a security perspective? The second one is, we are constantly under attack. Almost on a daily basis, team members receive like a phishing email, receive a text saying, hey, send me gift cards, or give me a password, right? So understanding that that's always going to be the case, and how do we protect our team members, whether it's endpoint security, whether it's using Okta to authenticate them, to make sure that if they are coming from a suspicious IP, we block their access, right? And then last but not the least, we are a startup. We can burn money like anything, right? So we have to be really prudent about, hey, before we get to revenue, how do we conserve our runway? How do we make sure that we are not to the point where we are running out of funds, doing the right things, building the team, but investing the right way. So, from a security perspective, I wanted to introduce this concept of micro versus macro. There's a lot of background noise. You guys can hear me still, right? Okay, great, thank you. I just want to make sure. So, yes, exactly. I don't have the headphones, so. So the micro is, hey, as I said, we are constantly in attack. This is an actual fish that our head of music received. So saying, hey, I'm the CEO, right? I need you to go and buy me gift cards. Go buy it now. And she was like, yeah, I can go get these Amex gift cards, right? And then obviously she had the presence of mind to say, this is not normal. This is not something that makes sense, right? So that's a micro approach, making sure that people are aware, making sure that we have phishing protections, but we also have phishing campaigns to exercise that. And then the macro is, hey, we are going to have hundreds of thousands of customers on, right? How do we make sure that we are protecting them? How do we make sure that their information is not being sold, right? Or stolen, right? Making sure that we are not being attacked by ransomware, right? So really taking that holistic approach, not just on our endpoints, but also on our AWS footprint, and kind of moving forward. And I'm pleased to say from an outcomes perspective, right? These are basic stuff that we have been able to achieve. First is, your old-fashioned scanner, right? But the reason I put it up there is because we are able to scan code, we are able to check for any vulnerabilities, whether it's using GitHub Advanced Security, whether it's using Vercel, which is allowing us to deploy our front end, right? And be able to really say, okay, what's going on? And one of the advantages that we have as a startup is, because we are so small, we are able to use a variety of different tools, whether it's for SAST or DAST, to really say, okay, how does the code look? How can we address it and really move forward? That's number one. Number two, we are constantly running phishing campaigns. We are constantly evaluating our team and checking, hey, are they doing the right thing, right? And then doing it in a way that's, in a non-intrusive way, right? But it's an engaging way, right? And really taking that approach. And last but not the least, we are being very upfront about security to our customers. So if you go to our website, which is very simple, JKBX.com, you will see that there is a security center. There's information for customers about what we do internally, but also what can they do to protect their information, protect their data moving forward. So feel free to kind of look at the website. If you guys have feedback, I'm always open to feedback. And then last but not the least, a few concepts for me in closing, right? You probably heard this in the beginning, but careers are jungle gyms. They are not like ladders. You don't keep going, one run to another run, right? You're moving, in different directions, but it's always important to pick up those skills. It's always important to say, okay, I've been doing this for a while. I'm going to go do something else, right? I'm going to try in a different setting, right? And that's where I think your experience really matters, because you're able to apply that across different industries, different segments, right? Whether it's large company, whether it's smaller companies, right? Number two is really this concept of we got to build things in. And this is not a new concept. This is been around for a while, but it's easier said than done. But it is really important to dedicate the time to say, okay, as you are laying the actual foundation, as you are putting up the scaffolding, it's important to really start thinking about security. Where's your weak points? How can you reinforce things, right? And finally, you gotta step out of your comfort zone. For me, for a long time I was in the blue comfort zone. And then for the last year or so, I'm somewhere between orange and red, right? But that's how you learn, right? You come out, you go into the learning zone, you go into the danger zone, and you're really pulling and stretching yourself, right? Because that will move you forward, that'll give you skills that kind of go a long way. So that's all I had, folks. It was, didn't have too much more, but I'm happy to stay on for any questions that you all might have. Cool. Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah, 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 yeah. So I'm going to repeat your question, right, just so that everybody can hear. His question was, what are the big things that you guys are protecting, right? And it's all of those. It's customer data, right? Because when customers sign up, because we are a financial services firm, they need to do KYC, which is social security number, driver's license, right? So that's number one. Number two, yes, business information. You know, we know how much Taylor Swift makes from different songs, right? So it's proprietary business confidential information. And then three is employee information, right? And, you know, again, employees are using a number of tools, so that's kind of the standard, what you would see in any other company, but because of our industry, slightly different. Any other questions? Great. If not, thank you so much for your time and enjoy the rest of the B-Sides.